Hi there, this is Sierra 117 reporting for an ASMR history lesson. In this video, I'll be talking about the events of the Halo firing array, as well as many of the events that took place during my time in service. To be clear, I won't be doing any of that weird, loud eating of cholesterol-laden foods. If you're into that, I have a friend you should meet. His name is the Grave Mind. Just kidding, to each their own. Just kidding again. That stuff really gives me the creeps. Anyways, sir, permission to tingle? Oh, forget I said that. Let's start with a special guest feature. Our guest is the most comforting, relaxing companion you can have. His name, the assault rifle. Let's move on to our next guest. He's quite an explosive character. Did you laugh? If you didn't, I'll have to show you why they call me the Master Chief. Just kidding, this is a safe space. On that note, here's a grenade. All right, let's get to the storytelling part. Once upon a time, in a faraway galaxy, a very long time ago, there was a highly advanced race known as the Forerunners. But ugly, if you ask me, but impressive nonetheless. They were the bearers of the mantle of responsibility and a duty to maintain balance throughout the galaxy. For a time, they lived peacefully, colonizing billions of planets throughout the galaxies. Their technological advancement was second to none. I'm talking self-fitting suits that biologically enhance the wearer, light technology the likes we've never seen, mess halls that create food in front of your eyes, and ships capable of precise slip-space travel in mere moments. With all of that, the Forerunners' military prowess was profound and dominating, and that, my friend, was the start of their downfall. Many amongst the Forerunner race became obsessed with the mantle and maintaining control over the galaxy. Many wars were fought. Billions perished, and within the Forerunner race itself, a rift began to form. With tensions rising and the galaxy becoming one big kettle on the flame, things finally came to a head and boiled over. The Forerunner race, a veil of power upon their eyes, wiped out the primordials, the very ones who granted them the mantle of responsibility. But as Gandhi once said, what goes around comes around. A new threat emerged. Over the eons, this foe has taken on many names. The horror, the infestation, the parasite, and most notably, the flood. The flood, a parasitic colony organism, was led by the Gravemind. Their purpose, consume all life in the galaxy. Faced with certain extinction, the Forerunners designed a weapon to annihilate all sentient life in the galaxy, thus removing the food supply of the parasite and forcing its extinction. Don't worry, a wise and caring Forerunner, known as the Librarian, stored life-form samples on a mega incubation center known as the Ark. That way, the galaxy could be reseeded anew after the weapon's destruction. And that weapon, of course, was Halo. Time passed, the dust settled, and the galaxy was reborn. But the Forerunners were nowhere to be found. Their handiwork, however, remained and became relics of a time long past. Relics, indeed, as an alien conglomerate known as the Covenant worshipped the Forerunners as their gods. The Covenant was led by the Sanshaum, or prophets. In truth, many of the Sanshaum were simply power-hungry and had less than religious motives in mind. One day, however, the prophets discovered that it was in fact the human race that the Forerunners had chosen to bear the mantle of responsibility and succeed them. Fearing to lose their grip of power and a total unraveling of their religion, the prophets created a new edict in the Covenant religion: annihilate the entire human race. And so their onslaught began. Billions were wiped away as the Covenant glassed planet after planet. And yet there was hope. That's right, good old Spartan hope. Let me take a step back. When I was 6, I was chosen by Dr. Catherine Halsey for an elite task force unit. This was not SEAL Team 6. We were trained from 6 years old and on. By 12 years old, we all knew how to shoot an assault rifle more accurately than any other soldier in the UNSC. At 14, we were given intense biological augmentations. Not all of us survived. Those who did, however, were faster, stronger, and smarter than any other human on the planet. The Spartans were able to buy time for the UNSC. Very precious time. And then everything changed. The first Halo ring was found, and the Covenant wanted to turn it on and begin what they referred to as the Great Journey. I was once again tasked with the seemingly impossible: destroy the Halo ring and save humanity. Of course, that's not where the story ends, but you're supposed to be sleeping, so for the rest of our session, I'll be reading random info guides on some of the elements of our story. If you want to hear more of my story, let me know when you wake up. In other words, wake me when you need me. The United States Space Command. In the 26th century, most of humanity is ruled by the Unified Earth Government, UEG, as most of the material from the Halo universe is from the ongoing war. We see the future mainly through the eyes of the UEG's military arm, the United Nations Space Command, UNSC. During the events of Halo 2 and Halo 3, the UNSC fought the Covenant over Earth in a last-ditch attempt to protect the human race. The events of Halo Reach are fought defending the planet Reach, the UNSC's former military headquarters. The UNSC was formed by the United Nations when overpopulation on Earth and conflict in the Sol system started becoming a severe problem in the early 22nd century. In the wake of the Interplanetary War in the 2160s, the UNSC became the military and space exploratory arm of the newly established Unified Earth Government. After the emergence of the Covenant threat, the UNSC was given power over the UEG and its colonial governing agency, Colonial Administration Authority. Although the civilian government was formally returned its power after the war, run by HICOM, the UNSC is Earth's premier defense against external threats. The UNSC Navy houses the divisions of Marines, including the Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, and the Fleet. The United Nations Space Command Armed Forces includes the UNSC Army, the UNSC Air Force, and Spartan operations, along with the Navy and Marines. Originally designed to keep the peace between neighboring planets and star systems, when certain rebellious factions began to present a problem in the late 2400s and 90s, the UNSC was forced to police its colonies to keep privateers and pirates from raiding them. The Swords of Sanghelios. The Swords of Sanghelios is a splinter faction of the Covenant formed by the Arbiter Thel, Vadam, and shipmaster Urtas Vadum, based upon an ancient Sangheli order. Formed from the initial alliance out of desperation with their former human enemies, the UNSC, they played a key role in ensuring the salvation of the galaxy and start a new era of relative peace alongside the UNSC. Facing civil war after the end of the Human Covenant War, the Swords became a major faction within the galaxy's political and military state. Alongside the UNSC, they shared the Joint Occupation Zones, research and monitoring stations on the Halo Rings, as well as Mjolnir armor. Much of the Sword's trouble came from the servants of the Abiding Truth and Julim Dama's emerging Covenant faction, both directly and indirectly caused by the Office of Naval Intelligence, which sought the destabilization of the Sangheli race. Ruled by a large council of Khadons, the Swords of Sanghelios attempt to bring peace and unity to Sanghelios, the elite homeworld, as well as returning the old values and traditions of Sangheli past. With their UNSC allies, they are succeeding in creating a new era of peace. The Covenant, originally formed as an alliance between two species, the Prophets, Sanshayum, and the Elites, Sangheli. The Covenant was a theocratic hegemony of multiple alien species. The name Covenant is based on the binding covenant formed between the two races when the Sangheli promised to defend the Sanshayum as they searched for the sacred rings, Halo Array, which are said to start the Great Journey, a term that the prophets use to explain the disappearance of their gods, the Forerunner race. The quest of the entire Covenant, the Great Journey, is the basis of all of their worship. As the Covenant Empire grew over a millennium, more species were enslaved to their cause, although, up until the Great Schism, none of them were quite as important to the prophets as the elites. At first, the Covenant were mostly held together by a need to survive, but as their society advanced, so did their technology, culture, and religion. Now, the polytheistic Covenant control a large part of the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy, and their society is a complicated caste system, with the prophets still on top, governing the Covenant along with the elites. The Covenant is a theocracy based on a prophecy about the sacred rings and the Great Journey. The actual context of this prophecy is based on the notion that the Forerunners were so advanced that they had found a way to propel themselves to godlike status using their technology. To oppose this, a parasitic race known as the Flood attacked the Forerunners and attempted to stop the activation of this technology. Before the Flood could stop them, the Forerunners activated the Halo Array and ascended to godhood. The Covenant design is to find the halos and use it to propel themselves to godliness as well. The three leading prophets, Truth, Mercy, and Regret, who were the hierarchs of the Covenant, wanted to destroy humanity due to the threat they posed to their religion. If humankind really are the Forerunners' heirs, then all that the Covenant believe in is false, not wanting the truth about the humans to get out. The rest of the Covenant have been told that humanity is a direct affront to the Forerunner, much like the Flood in Goal, so must be exterminated if the great journey is to be completed. The Flood, called the Parasite by the Covenant, is a species of virulent parasitic organisms that thrive by consuming other sentient life of sufficient biomass, no matter where in the universe, thus leading Forerunners to the creation of the Halo Array. The Flood appears to be a hive or communal mind existing in several stages that eventually lead into the creation of a central intelligence known as the Grave Mind. The Flood grow and reproduce via the assimilation of other beings, utilizing corpses and acquiring any biomass, including both animal and plant, in order to spread. Instead, they fester inside a host until a certain time period, after which they explode and many new Flood are given off. Once a grave mind is formed, however, the Flood advance to a stage where they no longer require hosts for this, only biomass and calcium, which they require to feed on and to build bodies with. Once they have advanced, they create hives which can produce thousands of Flood inside large pustules on walls and other surfaces, which act as incubators. During this stage, the Flood are able to build their own life forms using captured biomass and calcium deposits. The Flood continue in this fashion recurrently until either everything is devoured or until they are stopped, the former usually occurring. In modern times, little is known about their origin, except that they arrived from another galaxy and fought both prehistoric humans and Forerunners, eventually defeating the latter. The Forerunners discovered and then fought them until they were overwhelmed after centuries of war. Faced with the Flood spreading throughout the galaxy and consuming every sentient being, the Forerunners created 7 artificial rings called the Halos, galactic superweapons in the shape of enormous rings, to contain and hopefully stop the Flood from ever spreading. The point of the rings was to wipe out all sentient life, thus starving the Flood of the sufficient biomass required for them to continue spreading. Through their own interpretation of Forerunner artifacts, the Covenant believed these rings were actually devices that allowed the Forerunner to transcend this plane of existence into godlike state. And thus, they seek to do the same by activating them once more, not realizing they would inadvertently wipe out all sentient life in the galaxy if they were to be successful in doing so. Although it seemed the plan had been successful at eliminating the flood threat, samples of the organism kept on the rings for study were released on at least 2 of the installations through accidental means, putting the galaxy once again at risk of complete destruction by the parasite. The insurrectionists. The insurrectionists are various rebel groups opposed to the rule of the UNSC throughout human space who seek the colony's liberation from the unified Earth government's influence. Following the rapid volumetric growth of the region of space controlled by the human race throughout the 25th century, the UEG found it increasingly difficult to maintain its hold over the outer colonies, hundreds of which were scattered across exceedingly large swathes of space. By 2490, the outer colonies surpassed the core worlds in number by several hundred. Despite their more discrete composition, the outer colonies proved an ample breeding ground for a strong nationalist sentiment among their citizens, which in turn led to their perceiving the Earth government and the UNSC, which imposed its will, as a draconian outside force. In 2513, the UNSC initiated Operation Trebuchet, one of the largest operations in UNSC history, spanning 10 years and costing hundreds of thousands of lives. The goal was to root out the insurrectionists and impose order in the outer colonies. Following the Covenant attack on Harvest, and the onset of the Human Covenant War in 2525, Operation Trebuchet was put on halt by the UNSC. Insurrectionist activity as a whole, while not completely gone, died down during the Covenant War. After the end of the Human Covenant conflict, many insurrectionist movements, such as the United Rebel Front, which had ceased their operations during the war, began to resurface. A number of colonies refused the offer of peace and cut all ties with the UNSC, which, according to them, had abandoned them during the war. Of major significance in the post-war era was the rise of the new colonial alliance, founded by rogue UNSC Admiral Matthias Drake, which in early 2553 attempted to hijack the newly commissioned UNSC Infinity. The fall of Reach. By 2552, many of humanity's inner colonies had been destroyed by the Covenant. The UNSC leadership assembled a Spartan II strike team at the human command base on the planet Reach. In a move of desperation, the United Nations Security Council planned to launch a targeted strike against the Covenant leadership. This plan was abandoned when the Covenant launched a surprise attack on the world of Reach. During this battle, most of Reach is overrun and glassed, and the human fleet obliterated. One of the Spartans, Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, is able to escape on the ship Pillar of Autumn along with her crew. In fleeing the Covenant fleet, the Autumn's onboard AI, Cortana, uses a set of coordinates from a recently discovered Forerunner artifact that leads them straight to the Forerunner's Installation 04. In the game Halo Reach, the Spartans of Noble Team defend Reach against the Covenant invasion, most of them sacrificing their lives in the process. At the finale, they are given the task of transporting a fragment of Cortana housing critical data to the Pillar of Autumn. Noble 6 holds off the Covenant long enough for the Autumn to escape, indirectly enabling humanity's survival in the war. The Spartan 3 program and Onyx, Halo, Ghosts of Onyx, which tells the story of the events that occurred on the planet Onyx, begins in 2545 with the Beta Company of Spartan Thrace deploying to a Covenant fleet refueling depot on Pegasi Delta. They proceed to destroy the facility, but due to unexpectedly heavy Covenant resistance, all but 2 of the 300-strong Spartan company is wiped out. The only survivors, Tom B-292 and Lucy B-091, are revealed to be only 12 years old, and Lucy is traumatized and rendered mute. In 2531, Spartan 2 Blue Team raid a rebel base on planet Victoria to recover stolen nuclear warheads. The team is nearly captured by a rebel ambush, but is saved by the timely, intuitive intervention of Kurt 051. Sometime afterward, Colonel James Ackerson presents the top leadership of ONI with his proposal for a new Spartan project. They agree that the Spartan 2 program is prohibitively expensive and that a more streamlined, disposable breed of Spartans must be trained for high-risk operations. Kurt 051 and SCP-O Mendez are brought in to train the new generation of Spartans on the classified planet of Onyx. Over 20 years later, in 2552, Team Saber, Katana, and Gladius of Gamma Company, the third S3 generation, conduct a training exercise when they run into previously undiscovered Forerunner Sentinels. Through a series of events, a group of Sangheili-led Covenant discover the existence of Onyx and the potential Forerunner treasures within, prompting the United Nations Security Council to dispatch reinforcements to the planet. Meanwhile, Dr. Halsey, having disappeared on a quest of her own during the events of First Strike, arrives at Onyx and joins with the UNSC forces there. Pursued by the Sentinels and the Covenant, the human force discover an ancient Forerunner city where they learn that the entire planet is an artificial construct. Fighting off determined Covenant pursuers, they press on into the heart of the planet. Entering a slip-space rift in Onyx's core, they find themselves alone in a vast Dyson sphere habitat. Kurt 051 stays behind to activate a pack of nuclear warheads, sacrificing himself to halt the Covenant pursuers. Subsequently, Onyx itself disintegrates and is revealed to be composed of billions of Sentinels. The Sangheli, the Sangheli, Macto cognatus in Latin taxonomy, meaning I glorify my kin, are a saurian sapient species known for their warrior culture and combat skill. Named after their home planet, Sanghelios, they have historically been known to humans as elites for their former role in the Covenant's military hierarchy. Originally one of the Covenant's two founding species, the Sangheli formed the hegemony's military backbone until just before the end of its existence. They had a very strong rivalry with the Jiralhanae, which finally led to genocidal violence during the Great Schism at the conclusion of the Human Covenant War. After the High Prophet's Truth and Mercy ordered the genocide of the entire Sangheli race during the Great Schism, the species was forced into civil war against the Covenant proper. This was established after the assassination of the High Prophet of Regret at the hands of John 117. The two remaining hierarchs held the Sangheli responsible for the Prophet of Regret's death, and the species was seen as unfit to continue to guard the prophets. The prophets sought to achieve this through the use of the other Covenant races, primarily the Jiralhanae. Consequently, the Sangheli led a rebellion against the prophets. A significant number of Sangheli sided with the UNSC against the prophet-led covenant. This alliance continued to hold in the post-war era. The Great Schism formed the bedrock of the Covenant Empire's ultimate collapse and the end of the Human Covenant War. In the post-war years, the Swords of Sanghelios, led by Arbiter Thel Vadam and a Grand Council of Cadens, emerged as the effective Sangheli government. However, they were opposed by multiple Sangheli factions with differing ideals of how to build a future for their civilization, and the species remained embroiled in civil war for several years, while continuing hostilities with Jiralhanae groups in a two-front war. The Jiralhanae, Cervus ferox in Latin taxonomy, translated to wild slave, known by humans as brutes, are a mostly carnivorous sapient species of pseudo-ursine mammals. Originating from the planet Doisac, the Jiralhanae were the final addition to the Covenant hegemony. The Jiralhanae typically have a profound hatred of the Sangheli, unmatched by any other feud within the Covenant. This rivalry was fueled by the Jiralhanae's naturally aggressive and dominating demeanor, clashing with the Sangheli's societal sense of superiority over them at the time of the Covenant. Immensely strong, surpassing the strength of both Sangheli and Spartan the Sons, Jiralhanae typically place a greater emphasis on brutality than wisdom. They are considered to be a savage species on the whole. Preferring this potential for blind obedience, the High Prophet of Truth began plans to replace the Sangheli with Jiralhanae, slowly placing the latter in higher positions and giving them greater allowances than Sangheli troops would receive. Finally, on Truth's orders, the Jiralhanae began a purge of Sangheli High Counselors and Commanders throughout Covenant space, sparking a cataclysmic civil war known as the Great Schism that led to the dissolution of the Covenant. This conflict against the Sangheli would continue well after the end of the Human Covenant War, and like the Sangheli, the Jiralhanae would fight internally as well. The Kigyar, sometimes rendered as Kigyar, forerunner designation. Porosus latrunculus, Latin for hateful bandit. UNSC designation, Covenant Secundarium Carnivora Predonis, Latin for Covenant Secondary Carnivorous Combatant, are a dinosaur-like saurian species. Following their assimilation in 1342 CE, the Kigyar served the Covenant until its dissolution in 2552. Many went on to aid its remnants as mercenaries, privateers, and pirates, though the majority stayed independent of any such factions. There are several distinct races of Kigyar, though humans have commonly identified two groupings, jackals and skirmishers, based on encounters in the battlefield. In combat, Kigyar typically served the Covenant as snipers and scouts due to their excellent senses of sight, smell, and hearing. Ungoi, Latin Monicus frigus, meaning cold monk, also known as grunts by many individuals, are a sapient species of squat, bipedal, xenoarthropodal vertebroid lifeforms from the planet Balaho. In 2142, the Ungoi became the fourth species to be assimilated into the Covenant during their tenure in the hegemony. Ungoi were always the lowest-ranking species in general terms and were frequently mistreated by members of almost every other race, especially the Kigyar, Jiralhanai, and Sangheli. Ungoi were primarily used by the Covenant as laborers or, in combat situations, cannon fodder. They are commonly referred to as grunts, mainly because they are considered weak compared to other former Covenant species, and because they performed the majority of the labor required by the Empire. The Megalek Golo, Ophis Congregatio, meaning serpent union, is a gestalt of Lekgolo, which are small, worm-like creatures that group together to exponentially increase their intelligence, strength, and maneuverability. Of the myriad Lekgolo collectives, the best known is the Megalek Golo, or Hunter, a bipedal form that is used for heavy assault. Ironically, the Megalek Golo is among the least common Lekgolo configurations, but due to their formidable combat capabilities, they are most commonly fielded by the Covenant. While the term Megalek Golo is formally limited to this particular type of Lekgolo gestalt, with the other forms having different names, it is sometimes applied to other Lekgolo colonies as well. such as that used to operate the Deutorus pattern scarab, or the Goliaths employed by the Banished. And now, some calming Halo-themed music to send us off.